Welcome to SWAYAM online course on public financial administration. This is part 2 of our discussion panel. We have panelists Dr. Shobna, Assistant Professor from the Department of Economics, Madras Christian College. We have Dr. Chinnamuthu from the Department of Commerce, Madras Christian College. And we have a student from the Department of Economics, Ms. Surabhi. Welcome panelists for this part 2 of our discussion. We'll continue with the discussion we had on the status of Indian economy. In this session, we will take few pointers from the previous session and continue our discussion and see how we can perceive the status of the Indian economy. So, Surabhi, we spoke on tax evasion. What is your perception as far as the tax evasion is concerned?
Ma'am, when we talk about tax evasion, I have a very different perspective, I would say. As you mentioned before, 5% taxable capacity is considered to be a good statistics for a country like India. But in my opinion, as a young student of economics, 5% is too little for the world's most populated country in the world. I'm not a part of the working force right now, but once I am a part of it, and when I am a part of that minority that has to bear the taxes, I might not be comfortable. And coming from a generation that is very vocal about our opinions, and we're called the woke generation, who are very adamant, who are very upfront, who are very demanding of all things. So having a very low taxable capacity in the country would be something that is not accepted to us. In one of the reels that I saw on one of these social media platforms was that an average honest taxpayer pays about nearly 3 to 4 months of his annual salary in taxes. So when the sacrifice that we give annually is so high, the tendency to avoid taxes and the tendency to choose tax evasion is higher. So I think the behavioral aspect of tax evasion also comes from the ineffectiveness of the Indian tax collection system. One of these pointers that I would like to talk about is how there are loopholes in the tax collection policies which are being exorbitantly violated by a very few set of people who take advantages of these loopholes. If I have to give an example, it will be a very famous actor when he gifted his daughter a big property as a wedding gift. That property will not be taxed because it comes under as a wedding gift.
And also any other gifts given on weddings are not taxed.
So,
and one of the things that are kept away from the tax purview is agriculture. So while people, small and marginal farmers have to be definitely kept out of it, because as it is, they are struggling for resources. But there are a lot of people, typically politicians, who have a lot of money, who go under the carpet and they make use of the loophole, and they actually earn a lot of money, and they don't give the legitimate share back to the government. And that is something we have a problem with, because it's very unfair to expect the employee class, the middle class, to bear the entire brunt of having to fund for the infrastructure, having to fund for health services, having to fund, practically run the whole government.
Very true. When we talk about the taxation, I think more than so many benefits, I think we have so many criticism to discuss on. Surabhi, I think, being a very young blood, she rightly pointed out, why should I bear being a part of minority and all this stuff. But personally, when we understand about taxation system in India, of course, when we read through all the Income Tax Act, it is quite complex in understanding. But we need to understand even better about it. We have two types of taxes. One is direct and indirect. And we need to understand that indirect tax contributes more to Indian economy because it is invisible. When you even purchase 10 rupees Colgate paste or any other brands of any product, definitely you are paying tax to the government in varied form, and now we can simply say it as GST. But when you talk about income tax, that is where we all get very angry. Why should I pay nearly 3 months of my salary being under the slab of 20 or 30%? Just imagine, if you are going to earn 30,000 per month, your tax is going to be nil in India, because we have an exemption for it, because we have, as per the old regime, if you earn till 2,50,000 rupees, the tax slab that you are coming under is nil. If you are going to earn about 2,50,000 rupees and up to 5, you can enjoy the rebate of 12,500 rupees in the tax percent of 5. So again, you are going to be very happy. Now the problem comes when you are filing your tax under old regime and you are earning more than 5 lakhs. That is, if you are going to earn 1 lakh per month and your total income is 12 lakhs, then you are going to really cry about the tax that you are going to pay, being under the slab of 20% or more. And even if you enjoy or talk about new regime, the exemption is still 3 lakh, it is nil. Up to 7 lakh, from 3 lakh you can enjoy the rebate of 20,000 rupees with a percentage of 5. If you are again going to earn 12 lakhs per year or more, then again you will be cry to pay tax. It is not about the tax percentage that we are actually discussing. When you have an increased income, definitely you have to contribute to economy by paying tax, even though you fall under 5% or 10% or even 20 to 30%. But one thing that we all need to understand is we need to have a feel, and you need to feel that is a duty of every citizen to pay tax. Of course, tax evasion is crime, and of course, we should not take a ride on all these minorities or all this very less percent of people to ask them to pay more tax. But what I feel is, those who are not having much income, definitely they need to be exempted. Those who are having a very nominal income or above a nominal income, they need to be taxed. I think that is a natural justice that we are rely upon.
Precisely. We also have to inculcate a sense of moral responsibility among citizens, that it is our country. If we want something back, I think we have to pay taxes. And I think that taxes are, in addition to indirect taxes, direct taxes that you pay on your income or on any earnings that you have, on properties that you have, I think that's something that have to be paid by citizens. In fact, we need to be grateful for enjoying such peace and serenity in our country. I think we owe it back to our country. But again, there's always a hitch of just a few paying and too many people enjoying, isn't it?
Very true. When we talk about business, I always appreciate the GST part, because those days when we talk about business income, we always have a confusion what is business income. But after GST comes into a picture, if you are having a turnover of 40 lakhs and you are dealing with goods, you have to come under GST regime. And you are dealing with services, your services related business, if your turnover is above 20 lakh, again you should be under GST regime. Once you get under the GST regime, there is no point of tax evasion at all, because GST is quite strong infrastructure in India, and even GST Commission Committee and all the meetings, very many meetings that regularly been discussing about all the GST tax laws. It's so good and also strong to protect this business economy. So one way when we talk about taxation, of course there is criticism on direct tax, but indirect tax we are all quite happy, because we are getting more revenue from business, and every news clipping is publishing that we collected every year. Our collection of GST is very high, because we are bringing on all the unorganized sector. We are forcing them to register under some ODM scheme or MSME scheme act, and we are asking them to open current account. We are tracking all their turnover, and we are we are forcing them to come under GST regime, which is quite good.
I think that's one reason why the small and marginal traders are not happy about GST. Earlier they used to escape, from the tax umbrella, but now they've forcibly been bought under the tax umbrella, and I think that's a cause of huge disgruntlement among the small and medium traders
Very
particularly.
true. With regard to GST, no one can escape once you get this GST number, that is GSTIN, because every month you have to file GST returns, which means 12 returns. Every quarter you have to file a return, then again 4 more returns. Once in 6 months you have to file another biannual returns, and annual returns also you have to file. So being a businessman, it is not like earlier. Once you come under GST tax regime, it is very perfect that you have to pay money, and there is no much loopholes when you enter into GST. When we talk about SGST, that is State Goods and Services Tax, CGST, Central Goods and Services Tax. We also have this IGST, and also for Union Territory, we also including them under GST part. So, with regard to this indirect tax, we have a very good infrastructure in putting all of them under one umbrella to track all the transaction without any loopholes.
So you actually nailed it when you said that the GST collections are at their record high, particularly with the festival season and the onset of the new year. But there is one question that has always intrigued me. I mean, how do these small and little traders manage with the filing of the GST and the procedural problems that are associated with it? How, as a lay person who has not, because there is no need for me to file a GST, but what do you think are the problems that the small and marginal traders are facing? Is the website easy enough to navigate their way through, or how is the procedural part of it? Could you throw some light on that, sir?
Yes, I think that is a very sensitive question that you are actually asking me with regard to filing of GST. I've already told you that filing of GST is quite complex because so many filing that you have to do, more than 10-12 filings you have to do per year if you are having a GST number, that is you have registered with GST. But you also stated clearly that you are very much worried about small traders. What I would like to say is, being a small trader, if your turnover is like 40 lakhs or 20 lakhs, what I feel is less than 40 lakhs or less than 20 lakhs, what I feel is, then you are running a very small business where you are not really want to register under GST, and just income for tax filing needs to be done. But if you're talking about a business which is having a turnover above 40, what I feel is definitely you have to have system in place where you would have your own employee working in accounts department. You must definitely have your own employees in your organization where you'll be paying salary and all other stuff. So in that case, I think all your accountants should be aware of GST filing. And GST filing, though the number of filings are very high, it is quite convenient for business houses to file their GST returns. What I would suggest is that if your turnover is high, it is very much imperative that you are running a very systematic and organized business with more number of employees in the accounts department. They will take care of it.
Yes, so for this very reason, the GST, the Goods and Services Tax, is hailed as one of the most important structural reforms, taxation reforms of the country.
Also, ma'am, I would like to add on how I've noticed when all this while when we've been talking about GST, we've only looked at the producer side of it. One of the key achievements of GST, in my opinion, is also how it has hooked the consumer side to it also. When we talk about GST and the awareness that the government has undertaken to spread GST, it is also equally how much they have worked on the consumer side of it. When we talk about indirect taxes, the impact and incidence of tax is something that can be shifted, and with the introduction of GST, the consumer is aware of how much tax he has to pay exactly. With given tax slabs 5, 12, 17, 20 all on different sectors, we're aware of how much we have to pay, and in case if we're being frauded or if we're being taxed extra, as a consumer we can demand information, or we can ask what is the base of these taxation. So one of the key achievements of GST is also to make the consumer aware of what taxes they're paying and how much they're supposed to pay.
So it's brought in a lot of transparency into the entire transaction gamut.
Yes.
Very true. And also we need to understand one thing, that before installing this GST aspect in Indian taxation system, we have this double taxing and cascading effect in our taxing, and people were literally shifted all the 100% of taxes whatever the business person needs to get. But now I think, as Surabhi rightly pointed out, even consumers of Indian economy is quite happy because GST is very clear who has to pay taxes and who has to be relieved and where it has to be passed. And even a very good concept in GST is input tax credit, where whatever the amount of tax that I need to pay, that alone needs to be paid, not in excess. I think that's a very good thing about GST that we all need to be happy about.
I think we had a wonderful discussion on the GST, and it was really thought-provoking because we realized that how effective GST has been to the Indian economy, the positives we could draw from this discussion. And also we realize that how important that periodically there should be tax reforms and tax regulations in order to understand the importance or the impetus this tax reforms will create to the Indian economy. Talking about the Indian economy, we should also talk about the G20, which India had its presidencies also, which was all over the papers and all over the newspaper, and people were discussing about it. Surabhi, can you throw light on the G20 events?
Sure, ma'am. In one of the interviews, I heard an aspirant of the UPSC or the IS service answer a question like, if 2023 was the year, what are the 3 highlights that you would mark? And the reply to that question was, G20 would go down in history for our country. India's presidency in G20 has changed the entire setup for G20 as a whole. India is emerging as the leader of the global south and the global east. One transition that we can see in the present century is that we have always associated the West to be the leading nations, to be the nations that will contribute more in the developmental activities of the world. But now, with India's leadership in G20 and other Southeast Asian and other countries emerging, we can say that dominance of the West is somewhere reducing itself, and countries like India, China, African Union, all are emerging as great leaders of the world. In a journal that I read, there are 5 victories that India has experienced or India has seen in the present year for G20. These are both economic victories as well as geopolitical victories. Starting with number 5, the most important or the biggest success of G20 for India was the ability and the platform to showcase our culture, our talent, our advancement, our infrastructure, our economy, our people, everything at an international level. When the summit was held in New Delhi and other areas within the geographical territory, we were able to highlight how India has evolved in all these years and how we're different, what we're working on. A lot of countries in the world still look at India as, to be quoted, a country with snakes and beans. So for them it was a revelation to see how India has transformed itself from being a country of snakes and beans and curries to a country with development, ideas, innovation, and so much more that it has to offer in the present century. The 4th important highlight for the G20 session was this G20 session actually worked on outcomes. India, under the Indian presidency, we worked on 122 outcomes this year. All these outcomes are actually enlisted in the Delhi declaration published by the G20 committee. So if you want to read upon exactly what we worked on, there are 122 outcomes that we worked on, which range from economic development, agricultural development, infrastructure, healthcare, poverty, education, everything. The 3rd most important victory for India is the inclusion of the African Union. Under the Indian presidency, we have changed G20 to G21 by adding the African Union to it. You may ask why African Union is so important. Like India, Africa has 2 very important advantages in the present century. One, it has a young population which will act as key facilitators for economic growth and development. And secondly, Africa is a very rich hub for natural resources. In another publication which I was reading, I came across how this African Union inclusion in G20 under Indian presidency has solidified India's international relations with the African Union, and India is supposedly set to invest about $150 million US in developmental projects in Africa. This would be a great source of foreign remittance for our country. The second important victory for India is the establishment of the Middle East Europe corridor. Presently, the only road transport which is being undertaken is by China, the Belt and Road Initiative. We've already seen how post-COVID we've seen how China has a very big dominance in the international market and trade. So there's an imperative need of an alternate corridor for international trade to happen, and India providing this alternative trade route is going to be very beneficial for international trade and India's position in controlling international trade. Lastly, this is a very geopolitical point and a very geopolitical victory for India. The inclusion of Kashmir and Arunachal Pradesh as the units for the G20 activities. Internationally, we have not been very vocal about how we're being oppressed by China and Pakistan with respect to our territories in Kashmir and Arunachal Pradesh, but when we held G20 summits in these states, it was a clear indication to the rest of the world that these are very much part of India and we are entitled to this land. And the people and the culture of these states are very much Indian and should be respected by all countries in the world. So in my opinion, these 5 victories are very important for India in the present century.
Beautiful, Surabhi, for the 5 points which you had brought out. Only goes to show how the G20 summit was so successful, exhibiting India's leadership and also its strategies through the 5 points, because it's not only covering the social, cultural, economic and also political aspect. And finally, the most powerful statement is the statement that recognizing Kashmir and also Arunachal Pradesh. So moving from the G20 summit, we will also hit about one issue which has been always there in the Indian economy, which is the agricultural sector, because we realize that 50% of the employment comes from the agricultural sector and it is quite seasonal. True. And also it is not predictable, because we know that seasons and other reasons are there that the economy is not able to flourish as far as the agriculture is concerned. We also discussed a little on the marginal and the medium based farmers who are not able to do very well because of the debt situation or the loan engagement, which is not happening as far as this medium and small farmers are concerned. So can you throw light on this aspect, Dr. Shobna?
Sure, ma'am. I would like to take over take off from what Surabhi has said, that we had left India as a country had left no stone unturned in exhibiting our heritage. So we did it in various fronts, and the menu was also a part of it. We had the menu that was given to people with all its specialities, included plenty of millets which are indigenous to India. So 2023 is also considered the year of the millets, and that's brought about a huge traction and backward linkages to farmers who are actually cultivating millets. So bringing this discussion to agriculture, India essentially started off as an agrarian economy. So while China took the industry route, India took the services route. So India today has about 47 to 48% of its workforce entirely relying on agriculture for its livelihood. So which effectively says that agriculture is the largest employer in India. So that's on one side. So how much of it does it contribute to the GDP? It's about 17 to 18%. So which means that while it takes in the brunt of feeding the people, so the output which it actually gives to the GDP is not much. So which means that there are going to be structural problems associated with agriculture. Ma'am was also saying that it's seasonal in nature, and the size of an average farm in India is also small. So when you're talking about lower productivity, the size is low, there are several factors like disguised unemployment and things happening in the Indian agriculture which are huge bottlenecks. One is that the farmer has always been at the pity of Indian monsoons. So either there is a deluge of water or there is a drought. So this reflects in very sad stories of farmer suicides in India, which is again, see, for us, for people living in the cities, a farmer suicide is a headline which probably passes off in about 20 seconds and we feel sorry for it, and then we move about going into our own businesses. But for somebody who's holding the sector together, who's feeding the entire nation, I think that is it's a question of a huge thing that not only the government, everybody has to look into. So the agriculture sector is today at the crossroads of having to invest a lot of money. We have to make it hugely viable for small and medium farmers. So the output has to be increased. So productivity increases have to happen in Indian agriculture. The farmers have to be educated. There's a lot that has to be done in the agricultural sector as well. So that is my initial thoughts on Indian agriculture and where it is headed.
Very rightly said, Dr. Shobna, about the status of the Indian agriculture, which actually reflects on our Indian economy. Imagining agriculture as a sector, like how we consider industry, then I'm sure if we could invest more, have some schemes, although the government has brought in a lot of schemes to regulate the agriculture sector, they've also given the free fertilizers and other products. Yes, crop insurance is one thing which they have brought in. So that is very interesting to see that how the agriculture sector requires some kind of reforms, drastic reforms, so that we can capitalize on this area, which we are not able to, because India being more service sector, and although we are dependent on agriculture, we cannot come out of the agriculture aspect.
Well, there's another trend in Indian agriculture which I thought I should focus on. One is the increasing numbers of the younger generation moving away from agriculture.
Very true.
There are a lot of people who are presently in agriculture, the older generation, who say, no, there is just so much problem in here that we don't want our younger generation to actually get in there. So they want their younger generation to take up jobs in the cities and again move away from the agrarian hinterlands to the cities. That's one part. The second one is about the increasing transformation of agricultural lands to general lands which are used for building, construction and other things. So very key important agricultural lands today are being transformed and used up for something else. So that's one. So when people from the agrarian hinterlands are moving into the cities, we are calling upon ourselves another problem where, because of the increasing urbanization, you have the cities being extremely overpopulated with lack of even the basic facilities for a decent living. So people who were into agriculture, whose previous generations were into agriculture, are taking up jobs like Ola drivers or Swiggy partners, or that's the kind of jobs they are initially taking. They are trying to get a foothold into the very same little premium city space that is offered today. So that's another migration. Again, that brings us to a twin problem of urbanization where you don't have enough for people, and next one is about mass migration to the cities. So these are twin problems actually. Again, we need solutions from the government, from the corporate sector, who can contribute in terms of their corporate social responsibilities. There again, as I would say, there's a lot to be done in that space as well.
So very interestingly, you spoke about the inclusion of the other issues which is connected to the agriculture sector, because we brought in urbanization, migration, and also we are now able to reflect that agriculture is not an independent entity. It involves a lot of stakeholders. We saw that how the younger generation is moving away from agriculture, the need to attract them back into the agricultural sector. The farmers are giving up their lands. They are involved into a lot of debts. They are not able to repay their debts, and that's where they sell their land. So it's a big issue, and the vacuums cannot be filled easily overnight. So there is a lot of strategies which needs to be consulted and discussed, and the intervention of technology will also help in the agriculture sector. Dr. Chindamuthu, would you like to throw some light on the other aspects which perhaps we would have not discussed in the status of the Indian economy?
When we talk about some other aspects, what I would like to pitch in is about when we talk about other aspects, which we would like to pitch in is all about something that we need to think about behavior, financial behavior of each individuals that you are working on. When we talk about the financial behavior, we all aware that Indians have a behavior of saving for very past decades, but now I think it's slowly coming down. But when the saving behavior of individuals are slowly coming down, we can also seeing that more youngsters, college students and school students have started investing some small amount in capital market using so many applications that are available in mobiles. So what I would like to suggest is, in case if you are going to reduce our savings behavior, then we have to improve our investment behavior, which will give more returns to our Indian economy.
So, for investment behavior, one of the things we need to see, we need to focus on is on financial literacy. So, again, while we are technically a saving society, we are not an investment society. And any investment Indians have traditionally been doing in gold. So, we hold gold close to our hearts, and I mean, there's a lot of emotion and sentiment attached to gold as well. So, then that mold has to be broken. We need to teach people while they are in school what it means to be investing, what it takes to open a bank account, what is the risk associated with it. So those are the things that actually have to be inculcated even at the level of school, or even at least at the level of high school today.
So I think that's a wonderful conclusion. I don't need to even summarize the whole discussion, because we have got the conclusion itself on the financial behavior and also literacy, financial literacy, which are the two takeaways, I think, from the two discussions which we had, which is very essential, and it's understood that we need to create awareness about the status of finance, the status of saving, the need for and the urge to develop the economy, and change in behavior. The mental revolution is necessary so that we can stand against the troubled times bravely and say that the Indian economy is the best economy.
Yes.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, once again for your wonderful participation, for your wonderful inputs, Dr. Shobana, Dr. Chinamuthu, and
Thank
Ms.
you.
Surabhi. Thank you very much. I hope you would have enjoyed it.